Acts 12 is actually, I'm really excited about this. I've really been looking forward to teaching this for a little while. It's Peter's miraculous escape from prison. Now, we've heard stories like this with Paul and with Peter before, and I think it's important to really analyze this through the scripture in an outline form. So I want to talk to you about the when. So chapter 12 in Acts, which, as we learned last week, was written by Luke, and it was a second writing after he wrote the gospel, of course. And these events took place in 44 AD. And at the time, Herod was the king of Judea from 41 to 44 AD. So this took place in 44 AD, so we know we're coming up on the end of Herod's reign. And the characters that we're going to learn about in Acts 12 are James, who was an apostle and also the brother of John, Peter, an apostle and the brother of Andrew, Herod, which of course we just learned is king of Judea, and the grandson of Herod the Great, Rhoda, a servant girl who worked in the house of Mary, and John Mark, a traveling companion of Peter and Barnabas, of Paul and Barnabas. So this took place after James was killed in the city of Jerusalem, and it talks about Peter's great escape. So if we could turn to Acts 12, you'll conveniently find it between 11 and 13 for those of you who are having trouble with it. We're just going to read from verse 1 through verse 5. That's the first part of our lesson tonight. It was about that time King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church. He intended to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. When he saw that this met with approval among the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter as well. This happened during the festival of unleavened bread. After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. That's high security right there. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. So after the martyrdom of James the apostle and the rest of Peter, we learn that Herod persecuted the early church and he killed James. He saw that this pleased his Jewish contingency, his constituents, so he went after Peter. Now, Peter's in prison, 4 guards, 4 shifts. Don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. But it goes on in verse 6. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. "Quick, get up," he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and sandals." And Peter did so. "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me," the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea what the angel was doing or what was really happening. He thought it was just a vision. They passed the first guards, the second guards, and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent this angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen." When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, where many people had gathered and were praying. As Peter knocked on the outer entrance and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door, she recognized Peter's voice. She was overjoyed. That's kind of how my wife is when I come and knock on the door. She was overjoyed. She can barely contain herself. My hot little tamale over there. She was overjoyed, and she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, "Peter is at the door." "You're out of your mind," they told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, they said, "It must be his angel." But Peter kept on knocking. That's how I got my wife, too. I just kept knocking. Sooner or later, she'll open the door. She'll forget to lock it. Something will happen. You got to wear them down, guys. You younger men, you got to wear them down sometimes. A patient man has great understanding. It's biblical. I'm never going to be asked up here again by Pastor Stephanie. That ends my career of preaching. But Peter kept knocking, and they opened the door and saw him. They were astonished. Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. Tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this, he said, and then he left for another place. In the morning, there was no small commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered them all executed. That's a lot. That's a lot of meat on that bone. So what did we learn here? What did this just talk about? This is Acts 12, 6 through 19. The night before Peter was to be killed, he was bound in chains and sleeping between two soldiers, about as secure as you can get for a prisoner. The angel of the Lord woke Peter up, broke the chains, opened the iron gates to the prison. Miracle number 2. The angel departed as soon as Peter was safe on city streets. Peter went to the house of a woman called Mary, where many saints had gathered to pray for him. Peter knocked on the door. They recognized Peter's voice. The people in the house didn't believe her, but when the door finally opened, it was Peter. The search for Peter the next day went without success. So what was to become of Herod? In verse 20 we read, Then Herod went from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there. He had been quarreling with the people of Tyre and Sidon. They now joined together and sought an audience for him. After securing support, a trusted personal servant of the king, they asked for peace because they depended on the king's country for their food supply. Kind of similar to today in the Middle East, if you think about it. On the appointed day, Herod, wearing his royal robes, sat on his throne and delivered a public address to the people. They shouted, "This is the voice of a God, not a man." Immediately, because Herod did not give praise to God, an angel of the Lord struck him down, and he was eaten by worms and died. Whew. That's heavy. So Herod, dressed in his royal robes, gave an oration to the people. And when the people worshiped him as a god and called him a god, not a man, well, this angered God. So we've now read all of verse 12 in the matter of 10 minutes. But there's so much meat in that bone, I feel like we have to dissect it a little bit. So how does this apply? Let's ask the questions. How does an angel free a prisoner that's literally sleeping between two guards, chained to each guard, and has sentries, has 4 layers of security, including an iron gate? How does God manage to free a prisoner when there's seemingly no way out? Have you ever been in a situation where you just felt like there's no way out? Who did? Raise your hand. Well, how are you here? There was no way out. Yeah. Anybody else? What are you doing here? There seemed to be no way out. How did the guards not realize a man was no longer chained to them? How did they open the iron gate? God can work in ways mysterious and indiscernible to us. That's what we have to understand. We're not meant to understand everything God can or does do. He can affect and change the world around us without our recognition, even the things that are immediately in front of our eyes. Don't assume that because you can't see and explain God's work that he isn't working. There's so many times he's working in our lives when we're not meant to understand it, but he's there and he's working in our lives. We must understand that God can and does use all things for his glory. Amen? He can and does use all things for his purpose. For those of you here last week, I said that I had heard a pastor in Texas. I was listening to an interview, and that he had said, he was asked the question, why does God let bad things happen? And it was about the floods in Texas. And I suggested that I don't believe that. I don't believe God lets bad things happen. I believe the world is full of bad things that happen. The world is full of evil. But God doesn't cause bad things to happen to his people. I don't believe that. I believe God allows bad things to happen. But remember, God can use any prison, any chain, any persecution, any bad situation, any disease, any ailment, any divorce, any breakup. He can use all of it. What seems impossible for us to get through, he can use that for his glory and use it for good. It's amazing. And all of us have a testimony to it. I'm going to share with you a little of mine. So, those of you who have heard me preach on a Sunday morning, you've heard me talk about a time when I felt like I was in an impossible place and I felt like there was no way out. And it was too big of a testimony to tell on one Sunday, but I'm going to tell you the meat of that story. How many of you guys have a wife who watches those Lifetime original movies and you're like, oh, that again, one of those again? You got a husband that does that? We won't tell him you told us. We listen, but we don't judge. Nobody watches Lifetime movies in here? I know Stephanie does. Oh, Jaime, you do? I like how you're I like it, Jaime, yeah. Well, you know, a lot of those are true stories, and they're just so unbelievable. You wonder, who gets themselves into this mess? Well, I'm going to tell you about the mess that I found myself in. Before, and this is 2.5 decades ago, I was previously married before Mary, before I came to my senses and found her. Yeah. And it was really a broken marriage. And it was two broken people. You know, you heard about my childhood, those of you who heard me preach, and I grew up really broken. And what did I do? I went and found a woman who was just as broken as my childhood. And somehow you find that because that's what's comfortable to you. That's what you know. And when you have abuse, if you're used to abuse, it doesn't look like abuse. It actually looks like love. And I had a young family. I had young kids at the time. I had my first security company. I was doing okay. I thought I was doing a lot better than I was. I had fallen away from the Lord to a degree in that I thought my success was based on me. What I did with my company was based on me. The house I had, the cars I drove, was based on my accomplishments. God had to slow me down, and God used a bad situation by evil people in the world to glorify him. This is what happened to me. It's a true story. My two older kids were from a previous relationship of my ex-wife's, and their father was in prison for very, very bad things. Very bad things. Crimes against the children. No reason to really go into what he did, but very bad things. And all of a sudden, my marriage started to crumble, and it was right around the time when he got out of prison. So he got paroled. And my wife had asked me for a separation. And this was getting really weird for me. And the kids were acting really weird. And come to find out that she was back courting this man who was around my children. Well, you can imagine my frustration, fear, anxiety, anguish. So I did everything I could do to protect my children, including hiring a private investigator to try to find out what's going on. I did everything in my resources to try to figure out what's going on. So figured out that that's what's going on, that she's having an affair with this parolee who had previously hurt my children. And then all of a sudden, I get a knock on my door because we were separated. And it's the police department. And they arrest me. I had never been in jail before. So they arrest me. And they arrest me for crimes like federal wiretapping, federal wiretapping, corporal injury, residential burglary, And to be honest with you, I was laughing. I was like, where did I break into? I own a security company. What are you talking about? So they arrest me, and I bail out that night. It was a high bail because they had a bail enhancement because I was a security expert. So I paid $100,000 and bailed out of jail. 2 days later, they come back and pick me up again for second charges similar. This time, they got a bail enhancement to $500,000. I wasn't bailing out. I had a good lawyer. I'm paying my lawyer while I'm in jail. My business is suffering. My ex-wife moved this man into my home. He's driving my cars. He's around my kids. I can't do anything. I'm in a cage. I cannot protect my children. I'm in a cage. You see a lion pace a cage, imagine, all you fathers in here, imagine if you knew your kids were in threat and there was not a darn thing you could do about it. A couple weeks go by, my lawyer comes to visit me and says, hey, if you can't afford to pay me no more, I got to get off the case. I'm like, well, how am I going to pay you? You know, as soon as I get out of here, I'm good for it. No, that's not good enough for me. So he gets off the case. I am in the county jail, the only white male I can see, never been in jail before, and I've learned so much. Even the Hispanics don't get along with each other. You got the Norteños, you got the Sureños, you got the Border Brothers, the Paisas, there's so many different facets, and you can't make a mistake with that. Then you got the blacks, then you got the Asians, then you got the skinheads, and I don't fit in anywhere. You know, I'm a 30-year-old white businessman. Never before was I more thankful to God that I grew up rough in New Jersey, because I depend on every bit of that street smarts to get through that. So my lawyer fires me for all intended purposes, and they say, well, do you want a public defender? And I said, no, I want to defend myself because nobody knows this case like I do. And the judge said, well, I'm going to give you a public defender just for policy purposes and for procedure purposes. So I defended myself. 8 months I sat there in that county jail. And I'm telling you this from personal experience, from someone on the outside. Maybe it's harder for someone who's been in jail 3, 4, 5 times, whatever, to really look from the outside and see. We don't have a correctional system. We have human warehousing is what we have. They warehouse these people and they drug them up so they could sleep all day, and it's horrific. And I sat there for 8 months, but the most miraculous thing happened in those 8 months. I could not depend on my own accomplishments anymore because I had none. I had no business. I had no house. I couldn't help my kids. I was there with not a friend in sight. Nobody was putting money on my books. I was depending on indigent kit. And I was the only white guy a mile around. And they shuttle you around. They get you up at 2 in the morning, and they shuttle you to the Blythe jail or Robert Presley in Riverside or Southwest in Murrieta, and they shuttle you around. So it's not even like you could just find a safe place in one jail. They shuttle you around all the time. And then the most anxious times in that time was going off to court in shackles with your legs reaching the end of the chains and just chafing your ankles till it hurt. And out of nowhere, a song started playing in my head. I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice to worship you, oh my soul, rejoice. Out of nowhere. So every time that I walked that underground tunnel to the courthouse, I hummed that to myself, and I felt this peace come over me that I've never felt before. God did not put me there. People on this earth put me there. But God used it for his glory. While I was in there, I found out that my ex-wife was a busy little bee. She also was dating the officer that arrested me. Okay, I told you this was a Lifetime original movie. I told you. When you see this on Lifetime, say, I heard that already. I heard that story already. So this is getting really messed up. They're making sure I never get out, right? So they had my bail so high because I was a security expert. And they said, oh, God, he could break into any house. He could break into any security system. He's a security expert. I was like, this is not Mission Impossible, guys. It's not a movie. The Lord gave me such peace when I hummed that. And then something really miraculous happened. I led the biggest daily Bible study in the Riverside County Jail that even the captain, the warden of that facility said, I've never seen a Bible study this big. And every day I had people coming with no hope. Understand, guys, when somebody's in there, some of these gangbangers are in there, and they're waiting for trial for 3-4 years in a county jail, and they know they're doing life, they don't care about stomping somebody out or committing another crime. What are you going to do? Give them another life sentence? When I say I've seen the worst of humanity for 8 months, I've seen the absolute worst of humanity, and it's not just from the inmates. Some of those officers can be really, really questionable with the things they allow to happen or allow themselves to watch. So I led the biggest Bible study in Riverside County Jail every day, with everything from somebody in there for DUI all the way up to somebody in there for capital murder of a police officer and everything in the middle. This white guy, biggest Bible study with norteños and sureños and paisas and blacks and skinheads, just learning the word. And we did that every day for the last 4 months I was in there. When it came time for my trial, I had never felt anxiety like that in my life. So they came to me the day before trial with a plea deal, the DA did. And the plea deal was that they will drop 4 felonies and I'll plead to 1 felony and I'll do 2 years. And I turned down the plea deal. And my public defender said, it's a pretty good deal. And I said, not if you didn't do it. It's not a good deal. My kids need me out now. We went through trial, giving you the Cliff Note version, of course. Got my ex-wife on the stand, and all the lies came out. All the lies. She got caught in all the lies. Caught in all the lies. The DA, you should have seen his face. I can still see his face when he went pounding on that federal wiretapping charge because they thought I had federally wiretapped her phone because how would I know about her affairs and everything else? So I subpoenaed the private investigator who came on the stand and told how I knew. More lies, more lies. Had the police officer on the stand. After my ex-wife was on the stand and the police officer who she was having an affair with was on the stand, the DA came to me that night with the plea deal. You go home today. Go home today. Plead to 1 felony. Because they just want that. Here's the other thing about the DA's office. It's not always about right and wrong. It's about wins and losses. You plead to 1 felony, you go home today. Man, did I think about that one. All I heard was go home today. That's all I heard. Until I hummed that song back from the lawyer's room and back to my cell. And the Lord, much like the James story that you may have heard, some of you heard, said, what are you doing? Don't you trust me? And I turned down that deal and said, oh my God, please don't let me regret this. Please don't let me regret this. And I had my own moment of feeling like there was no way out. And I said to God, I said, if you get me through this, I will give my life to you. I will speak this story. I will speak of the men in here that are not being rehabilitated, they're being trapped. I will speak of the wrongs that are going on in the world. I will be an advocate for fathers. You know, I don't know how serious I was about that promise to God, but he was serious. He was serious. Trial ended, and when you're out of trial, they keep you in a holding cell for the rest of the court day because you never know when the jury's going to come back. They don't schlep you back across the street and up. They keep you in the holding cell. Talk about anxiety. The jury came back in 2 hours. Oh, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I just remember being at peace walking back into the courtroom. After all this anxiety, for the first time in 8 months, I was at peace no matter what happened. I literally was at peace no matter what happened. But I can tell you I cried like a baby when I heard the count 1, not guilty. Count 2, not guilty. All the way through, 5 counts, not guilty. So I went home that day. an exonerated man, and got my kids. Had nothing, lost my business. They had run my business to the ground, lost everything. But when I say God gave me back what I lost tenfold, my God, look. And I didn't even make her marry me. I just asked. You know, I have 9 children and 15 beautiful grandchildren. You know, I have such a blessed life. And I remember walking out of that jail. There was the Penguin was his nickname. He was a Indio gangbanger, and he was never getting out. And I left my Bible there that I did the Bible studies with all my notes in it. It had all my notes in it. And it was a beautiful Bible. It was a prison issue Bible, so it really wasn't a beautiful Bible, but it was beautiful to me. I left it there. I didn't take it. And he said to me, "Oh, see, you're just like everyone else that comes through here." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, you get God in here, and then you leave him in here when you leave. I said, no. Yeah, I love this Bible, and I love these notes, but I'm leaving it for the next one. I can go buy a Bible out there. I'm leaving this with all the notes for the next one that comes in here that needs this. Took a couple years, but a couple years later, it wound through the civil court. We sued the county of Riverside for false imprisonment. We sued them for knowing that my ex-wife was lying. And the DA's exact response when he was confronted with her obvious lies on the stand was, this is what a man of the law actually said. He said, "Well, we've come this far. Let's see what a jury says." So we sued them, and I'm not allowed to disclose the settlement, but I was quite happy with the settlement. The point of the story is this. Just like this, Peter, this one got put in a cage in a situation that seemed just impossible to get out of. There was no way out. I mean, I had the cop testifying against me. I had, my ex-wife testifying against me. How do you get out of that? I didn't have a lawyer. But I did have a lawyer. I did have an attorney. And he said, while you're in here, yes, you're in a bad situation. I didn't bring you to that bad situation, but I'm going to use it. I'm going to use that situation. And boy, he did. Do you know this book was written over 1,500 years? 1,500 years this book was written. This book was written by 40 different men. In 3 languages those 40 men spoke. They lived on 3 continents. 39 of them were Jews. 1 was a non-Jew. Some of them died before other ones were born. Yet what happened? It's all the same account. It's all the same story. I can't take 40 of you, put you in a room where you know what I'm doing, give you one topic, and you all agree on it. But 40 men over 1,500 years living in different times all come up with the same truth. Tell me this is not the word of God through man's hand and man's eyes. It's unity through thought. When you're going through something impossible, just remember, your almighty God has already acquitted you of the charges. It doesn't matter what he says or she says. It matters what he thinks of you. And you don't always have to be innocent. Sometimes we do things that are wrong, or the wrong choice, or the wrong decision. He's still there to advocate for you. He's still there to walk you through it. Thank you for listening to my story. You're the first ones to hear that story. I've never told that story. I've told the before, I've told the after, I've never told that story. So you're the first ones to hear that story. Yeah. Well, the floor is open for discussion on Acts 12. We can discuss. Somebody else can give a testimony. Somebody else can tell what's on their heart. Anyone?
So I'm just going to share basically what God can do and how overwhelmed that I am. So 12 years ago, my daughter, only child, passed away. She left one son, and so my only grandson. And needless to say, he's 24 now, but he has struggled. Everything from choices to have a job, don't have a job, don't work, don't. And so the whole time, my daughter was very strong in her faith, and she prayed over him so many times before she passed away. And her last words to him were, "You're going to be a mighty man of God, Hunter." And so for the last 12 years, this grandma has watched him suffer, really, and struggle. And it's been a terrible watch. And so Friday, he texted me. Sometimes I would go months and not hear from him, and then he would text me. And so he texted Friday and basically said he was being evicted from another place, and that could I pick him up and his stuff and store his stuff. Doesn't have that much stuff. And he didn't have anywhere else to go. So I knew of the mission here in the valley. I immediately started, obviously I'd been praying the whole time, but I had been researching. So when I picked him up, I said, do you have a plan? And he said, well, I just think, I'll take your stuff to your house, and then I'll just kind of research, group homes and shelters, and, and I'm, okay, like I'm going to drop him off on the corner and go, okay, well, have a good walk. I mean, obviously I'm not going to do that, but he's at a point in his life where he needs direction, and he needs something that obviously all these people that have tried to help him through the way, and I have done, because I know best. At the same time, you're praying to God on the left hand, but your right hand is going, oh, but I know. And so I said, well, I have another plan. I said, let's talk about this plan. So we talked about the mission. I told him about it. He's not from out here in Coachella Valley. And I prayed the whole time picking him up. I prayed over the seat in the car. I just prayed, have his heart be open, because before it had not been open. And so when I told him about the mission, would you be willing to at least talk with them? I knew a girl that I had mentored that's now an employee there, so I contacted her. She was praying, and Hunter didn't even skip a beat. I said, so would you talk with them? He goes, well, yeah. And I was like, whoa. I just felt God was in that car. God just dropped down, and I was just like, okay, take a breath. He said yes. So bottom line is, it's Wednesday, so we connected. I was connected with people that I knew at the mission, and they took him in. And so I'm just prayerfully, believing that he'll go ahead and be part of the program that they have, so that he'll get the job training and obviously the influence. And maybe he'll find out that, men that have been on the street, maybe that's not such a good idea. So it's been a very emotional week, but it's just how God can work. And he needed his Social Security card in order to go there. He said, I think I lost it. And I'm just like, So I remembered that he had given it to me at one time, and so I was looking, couldn't find it, and then all of a sudden he opened up a box that we had moved, and there was a notebook, and he goes, oh my gosh, here's my Social Security card. And I thought, okay, another thing that God knew he needed it, and he, there it was. And so I'm just feeling blessed and overwhelmed and amazed how God works. And he did it all without my help. That's what's more amazing. He did it without my help. I don't know. He's I guess he's a young man, and my husband's like, let him breathe. And I'm like, So I messaged, of course I did, I messaged. I'm like, okay, you don't know, I know. So I messaged him, and I said, so are you okay? Yep. Well, women, you're like, yep. Oh, and? yeah, and so I thought, okay, okay. And the whole time I just, I'm stubborn, but I felt God say, shh, let me work. I have him, and of course, again, my left hand, is over here going, but I need to know. And so I waited a day. Woo! And then I texted him and I said, so how's it going? How's the food? Felt so superficial. Like, how you doing? What are you going to do? And all he said was, I had a physical, and the food is actually quite good. And that was it. So he's not little. He's 24. So I think he's doing okay. You asked me that. I don't,
He's where he needs to be right now.
That's what I think too. Yeah. So again, no thanks.
Well, don't say no thanks to you. I think you had a lot to do with it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you've been praying. Hey, there's nothing like the power of a praying grandma. I mean, you just keep praying and believing and thanking God for his progress, even the little progress. Just keep thanking God for that progress. If he doesn't want to talk about it right now, God wants to hear about it. But we all have kids like that with a yup. I remember when Mary was trying to get to know one of my sons who's, not a conversationalist, and when we first met, and she's like, so how's it going? Fine. What you up to? Nothing. Okay. How's your day? Good. Nice talking to you. Yep. Great conversation. Anybody else want to share? There you go, my dear.
Well, as you all know, Mario had his open heart surgery. But you're talking about how God works, and that's what I want to bring to this situation. For about 10 years, Mario has had a syncope where he would faint. There's been times in church listening to the service where he says, I'm dizzy, and he'll lay his head on my shoulder and he'll pass out for, 10 seconds, and then he'll wake up like nothing's happened. He'd been asking the doctor for years, what's going on? Why is this happening? It doesn't feel safe. Something's wrong. Well, this one time, last week, Thursday, no, it's been a lot, the week prior Thursday, I wasn't there, and so he passed out again, and it was in an establishment where they would call the ambulance, and the guy, the ambulance EMT convinced him to go, saying, if you were my dad, I would have you go and be tested for any brain injury or anything and make sure you don't need stitches. So when we got in there, they had seen the record, his health record, that he's had these problems, and so they kept him overnight after giving him stitches, which was the only issue from that fall. But the fainting, they recognized, we need to keep you for overnight observation, and that's when they saw that his heart had stopped for 8 seconds in his sleep in the middle of the night. So that's when they got serious and started doing every test they can on his heart. They found the blockages and did the bypass surgery. And then that was on Monday. And then on Wednesday, in the night again, his heart stopped twice and came back for like about 5 seconds and then 7 seconds. It was a couple times throughout the night. So they knew they had to put in a pacemaker to keep his heart pumping. And so this is where God used a moment when I wouldn't be there and he'd say, I'm okay, let's go home, and I would just take him home. He used a moment when I wouldn't be there, and the actual medical technicians were there and convinced him to go. he took that moment. He had the right people on it, and God had the right people on it to actually finally observe what's going on with his heart. Because I would wake up several times over the years because he'd quit breathing. It's like, I don't know, I just wake up because he stopped breathing. And I push him, and then he would snort and breathe and roll over. And and so I'm just saying the Lord does use situations and make them right. And so what I've been told is that pacemaker is going to give him that pulse that won't stop. And the bypass is going to give him at least 15 years. Now, if he wouldn't have had that blockage taken care of that we had no clue was even there, it could have been a day or 5 years, and he would have had a massive heart attack, and I don't know if I would even have my man back. So now the whole thing is you go through, I mean, when you are going through this, I am understanding through the Lord that, okay, a week, a month, 2 months of hard time and healing so that you can have several years more to live in this life for him.
Fantastic. That's a fantastic story. I want to share with you 2 Timothy 2:9. This is a verse that I discovered while I was in there for the 8 months. And it's something that I clung on to. And 2 Timothy 2:9 says, "For which I am suffering, even to the point of being chained, like a criminal. But God's word is not chained." It goes on in 11 to say, if we died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we disown him, he will also disown us. If we are faithless, he will remain faithful, for he cannot disown himself. Anybody else have anything to share? Anybody need prayer tonight? Oh, you want to share? All right. What are you going to say first? You can't trust this one.
I know. Wow. Be careful. Sleep with one eye open. That's Pete's sense of humor. You guys will get to know that. I know we did testimonies, but I want to go back to the scripture if I could. One of the things that stands out to me is when it talks in Acts 12, right around 12, when he realized basically that he was unchained, and he went to the home of Mary, the mother of John Mark, where many were gathered in prayer. He knocked at the door in the gate, and the servant girl named Rhoda came to open it. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed that instead of opening the door, she ran back inside and told everyone, "Peter is standing at the door." So their response was, "You're out of your mind." So it was answered prayer. And their response was, "I don't believe it." I don't believe it. And they just, so the next thing they did was then they said, it must be his angel. So they tried to rationalize something that they didn't understand in the flesh, because this was an answered prayer, this was a miracle, and they couldn't wrap their mind around it. So they automatically, as we do as humans, they wanted to rationalize it. They wanted to explain it. And I know that I have many times tried to explain things that make sense to me, rather than accepting a blessing that God has provided, a miracle that God has done. And that's when our humanity gets in the way of really believing that God can do what he says he does, what his word says that he will do. So I think to me that makes me remember, makes me think, makes me want to be a little more open and receptive that God is active, not just back then, but today. His word doesn't expire. It's not something for back then. It is for now. It is a word in due season for us, that like you for your grandson, him calling you, him reaching out to you, you being able to get him into the mission. It might not be what you want to see, but this is very well could be the miracle that God is opening the door for some healing for your grandson. And I think that's something that we could all try to remember. It might not be the way we want to see it, but God's doing something. Don't try to explain God. We will never be able to explain God or his ways or the way he moves and does things. So that was their miracle. And it took them a second to just kind of realize and grasp it and receive it. Just wanted to share that.
Well, thank you. Yes.
I have a question, Pete. You know, I was thinking, why would James' life not be spared, and Peter's was? Because both James and Peter were in the inner circle of Jesus, and we think, wow, look what a miracle that an angel appeared, and Peter made it, okay, and James did not. And so I was looking up and reading, and James was beheaded. And so the king was trying to really make a spectacle of him, to say, okay, you're preaching the church, you're trying to build a church, you're trying to get all this done. And so he's like one of the main leaders. He was one of the three in the inner circle. And so they wanted to make an example of him. And he says, if you're going to be a leader in the church, I'm going to kill you. And what I saw from reading here is that indeed he was killed. But God has a purpose for every one of us. We talked on this Sunday, and we're going to talk on it this next Sunday, that every one of us have a purpose and a reason we're here on this earth. And what I saw is that God spared Peter's life because Peter actually started prayer in the church. That was huge. And then James, even though his life was taken, it didn't stop the church. The church grew because of the death of James. And so I could see here that we all have a mission. Some are taken early in life, and some live long, and some suffer, right? You know, my son passed away a year ago, a heart attack, 47 years old. And, you know, I didn't question God. God, why? Here's a young man on the mission field preaching a fiery gospel. You know, is he perfect and the things he went through in life? No, but none of us are, right? God uses these people that have issues, you know. All of us have issues, but we're trying our best to press in and live as good as we can for the Lord. But here's the deal that I saw. We all have a purpose. And I can even see that when we're not striving for that purpose in God, you know, and the Lord knows if we're going to live for that purpose or not, for that purpose to take place in us, you know. And maybe our purpose is over. We've already done exactly what God's called us to do. Our mission's over. It's been accomplished. Yeah, and the Word tells us that God's the one in control anyway. So we don't know, but we don't have to question God. God, why did you do this, you know? But it was amazing that these are two great men of God. One had a miracle and one was killed. But here's the thing, even in his death, this was the big thing about James' death. In his death, he died a bold death for Christ. And in that mission, this is what I saw. Would we die a bold death for Christ? You know, what that does is build our faith. God, I would die for you. Though my life be taken, I will die in faith for you. So I just wanted to say, whether we die in faith or whether we live in faith, you know, the main thing is to find our purpose in God. God, why am I here? and then let's take that purpose and live it out through faith. Because either way, we're going to all die one day, right? Peter eventually died, but I thought that was really good. Why in the same chapter would he take one and not take the other?